Okay, folks, Dr. Nick Begich will be with us about 15, 20 minutes of the next hour. We will take some calls for Dr. Nick Begich specifically on any questions you've got, but please call in for Dr. Nick Begich, 800-259-9231, 800-259-9231. Dr. Begich, we were talking during the break about the global social engineers. We know there's several different power blocks. And I know they know these secrets that we're discussing here, but they've made the conscious decision to do dehumanizing things so they greedily can control the future. And I was asking you, how can they know these great truths and consciously turn against those? How, when they tune in to what those of us that have discovered the larger scope of reality, how could they gaze upon this and the human potential and decide to engage in the type of activities they are?
Well, firstly, I'll tell you two things that are very telling in this. Is firstly, what all that research showed was that people have these capabilities latent within us. In fact, there's 2 studies being done by DARPA now in California for looking at methods for figuring out how telepathy works, mental telepathy, knowing what people think. Now imagine yourself being in the New World Order crowd and the population knowing what you think. You know, there's a lot of people with a lot of dark secrets that would prefer not to have them open in the light of day. And that's again, part of this fear is if people really had these potentials active in their lives on a regular basis, there would be no place to hide. We'd be laid bare. I mean, think about it. All of our sins, all of our good things that have happened in our life laid bare.
But that's already there, just people don't know how to recognize it. And I don't want to get off into this, but I've had many dreams that come true exactly. I constantly, I mean, it's just constant. And then most people just don't know how to recognize that it's already there, that we're already electromagnetically tied into everything.
Yeah, and the fact is, every once in a while we get little glimpses, and all of us have experienced that. We go, wow, that was really interesting. But here's what also is known, is that there's specific biological activity that is associated with those kinds of events. And this is where the science went in the 60s and 70s, is figuring out, hey, can we make someone else experience these same kinds of things? And as they discovered that everybody, every human has a natural capacity for these things, it scared the heck out of them. And then the question, well, how do you control this kind of activity from breaking out, you know, within populations where they can actually be free? You do it with fear and worry, because you really, I'm telling you, is if you look at this with scientific instruments to measure brain activity, you cannot, I repeat, you cannot reach higher states of consciousness as long as you are worried and fearful. And think back on your upbringing in terms of how people related to fear and how fear was used, and you really recognize how powerful it is, but how evil it is at the base to use that to motivate people rather than the logic and the good sense of good argument. And that's what's driving so much. And here's the other part of the problem, is the planners, military planners. You know, in the military in the West, it's in a closet because they're not run by the military, they're run by the civilian sector. And the reason for that is military has to have this sort of paranoid mindset where they think of every horrible thing that could ever happen and then build a plan to safeguard the country. That's their job, and I don't begrudge them for it. In fact, I'm glad they're there doing that job. But because that thinking has to do with distrust, has to do with dealing with the evilest of evil, people then look at this as, okay, what do we do to get on top of it, to keep people from falling into these positions? And then you have bureaucrats deciding that maybe they know best what people ought to be thinking.
Well, they call it full-spectrum dominance. They say the truth must be guarded by a bodyguard of lies. They fill every vacuum of possible evil in the name of full-spectrum dominance, but they have now become evil. They have not defeated all the avenues of other evil by filling every criminal spectrum.
Right. It's like the war on terror is supposed to reestablish freedom. We got the most oppressed, surveyed society ever.
Exactly. Stay there. Analyzing the enemy attack profile, though, it's completely premeditated. We'll be right back.